All right, I think we're going to get started here. So just to make you aware, there are books back there that are free as compliments of the Great Lakes Poetry Festival, and there are books back there that are not free, but compliments of Dana from Snowbound Books, who's selling Diane's newest collection. So welcome to the headline poet reading of the Great Lakes Poetry Festival this year. So excited to have Diane here. I'll just make you aware of a few things that are upcoming. You probably already know. I know you all have the brochures taped to your refrigerator or wall, so you don't miss a thing. But tomorrow night, we have a reading of poets from the Youper Poetry Anthology, edited by Raymond Luzak. We have a really nice lineup of about 7 or 8 poets from that anthology, and also a really special little video that Raymond sent me that we're going to start out with as well. And if you were at Raymond's reading at the beginning of the month after the blizzard, thank God we have 60 degrees today, isn't it? But if you were at Raymond's reading, you know what a wonderful and expressive poet he is. So it's really something. But after that, we have Wednesday night, which is going to be a reading by Russell Thorburn and Beverly Mathern. Russell was the first UP Poet Laureate. Beverly is the current UP Poet Laureate. So it is officially known as the UP Poet Laureate Deathmatch. Anyway. And then Thursday night, we have a night of Indigenous poets. We have Marty Reinhardt, who is going to be reading. We have Tyler Detloff, who is going to be reading via Zoom because his wife is pregnant and he can't come from the Sioux to read because she's due like any day. So I couldn't convince him to leave her and come here for the poetry festival. Oh, well. And then we're also going to be honoring the memories of 2 poets, really wonderful poets whom we lost in the last couple years, Indigenous poets Sally Brunk and Rosalie Petrosky. Friday, we have a Dead Poet Society that we're going to be showing right here at 12 noon in the community room. And then Friday night at Superior Culture from 7 to 9, we have Harvard Square Press Night, where we have many poets who have published with Harvard Square Press who are going to be there reading, selling their books, drinking kombucha. You don't want to miss it. And then Saturday, we have at 11 o'clock here in the community room, we have the winners. We have all of the teens who entered the teen poetry contest, and we're going to be announcing the winners that day and giving the prizes out from 11 to 12 here. And then from 1 to about 3 o'clock, we are going to be doing a reading for the 3-day chapbook contest winners. And the books will be, I've seen them, they're beautiful, and they will be available for sale on Saturday. And then Sunday, we have our closeout of the whole Great Lakes Poetry Festival at Rippling River Resort from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. at Rippling River. And then Monday, I'm taking a nap. Okay. So let me just say, I know you're all here. You all know Diane's work, but I'm just going to say a little bit about her before I bring her up. So Diane was born in Kansas City, Missouri. Missouri, right? That's how you would say it? Yeah? Or do you say Missouri? I say Missouri. See, I was right. And to parents of German and Cherokee descent, she received a BA from the University of Missouri in the University of Missouri in 1964, an MA from the University of Central Oklahoma in 1983, and an MFA from the University of Iowa in 1988. I can show you the list of every book and poetry. It's 3 pages long. So if you want to see that, I'll have it back there at the table. You can read it. But she's a multifaceted writer who writes in many, many genres, not just poetry, which we are going to hear tonight, but novels, screenplays too, right? And all kinds of different prose works as well. But she has also won many, many awards, including, I'm not going to list them all, but the American Book Award, the Pushcart Prize, the Capricorn Prize, the Juniper Poetry Prize. Again, I have a list. If you want to see all the awards, you can come and see me at the back of the table after Diane is done reading. But you're not here to hear me speak. You are here for the Woman of the Hour. Please put your hands together for Diane Glancy.
That was a wonderful introduction. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here tonight. Thank you all for coming. Marty took me through your wonderful library today. I was quite impressed. I actually had a colleague who said once he judged a city by the library that was in it. So you are indeed an amazing city. I want to read some poetry and talk a little bit about it. I may need my glasses. Poetry to me often comes through observation and then arrangement of those observations. We had a solar eclipse earlier this month, and I know you did here also. And so that was on my mind. And then in my backyard, I have a catalpa tree. If you know what they are, they have these long pods, and sometimes they fall out and stick in the ground like javelins. They're really a great problem because they're so messy. So I started with that. It's called Eclipse, April 8th, 2024. The old catalpa drops its sticks in the yard. Dry and brittle, I snap them like green beans. I think of a woman gathering twigs, maybe an ancestor, who visits at the moment the moon stands in front of the sun with a cold fist held to the fire. And then I wrote a second poem, also about observation, arrangement of those observations, and memory. What very not to do. There was a light in the yard, an eclipse above me. Do not look, no, do not do it. I loved you for a moment. The spots of light reflected, somehow green raisins, the dark center of a sunflower. A few thin clouds passing, as if someone watering. I remember the story of the frog that swallowed the sun. For a moment in the yard chair, with my eclipse glasses, I watched the sun back out. I'm going to read from Psalm to Whom, in which poetry cohabitates with creative nonfiction, and even a short piece of fiction. But poetry to me is a Pokemon that eats other genres. I start out to write an essay, and pretty soon that poetic thought is coming. It's actually poetic thinking that is the destination. I heard someone call the transformative thinking a high wire act as you walk between the abstract and clarity. Among my friends are letters of the alphabet. As a loner, I write a lot, as I have to have something to do, and the letters of the alphabet always are there. I need them because I live near a barren wilderness I am afraid will swallow me if I don't occupy myself, and writing seems to fill that desperate need. I can't read your handwriting is a sentence I have heard frequently, though I try to pry open the letter E that always closes like an I without a dot above it. Or an eye that seems to close in the long afternoons like roly-polies, or the 4 o'clocks in your mother's yard she wouldn't share with you, being a loner herself, not willing to share house or yard or self. I had a brother, but he too seemed inaccessible, living on his island off the coast that was our house wherever we lived, in which whoever came would enter after drowning. And is why our father was not eager, except on the occasion of his birthday, when we held an austere celebration for him with cake. My family was the front seat in an old car. In those days, the seat would not move forward or recline. The car had a clutch and gear shift and a knob on the steering wheel with which to turn it as it went down the street, and ahead was a corner. The hood ornament was a figurehead on the bow. Tires always seemed undeflated and made a clomping sound over the pavement as if galloping, and curb feelers helped you park by the curb without scuffing the white walls. Sometimes I add letters to words, as in E to whom, as in WHOME, because then I see home, for which I always am looking, and have looked for in the years of my living. The W was the front porch, which houses had in those days, with a swing for sitting outside, and in the movable, mergeable world in which I lived, the W also was the barrier reef against the wilderness. In nightmares, I never could tell if I was on land or on the sea. Often I make a noun, a verb, as my room homes my pencils and paper and erasers. And as I write a lot, I also sharpen my pencils a lot, with the jagged noise that sounds like trying to start a car with its engine already running. On the subject of cars, they also have been friends. On the subject of pencils, they have been the cause of friends, which are the letters of the alphabet that make words. That was a piece that started out to be a creative nonfiction, I guess, and then turned into a long prose poem. And the same happened to this, The Invention of Loss. Later that day, we walked along the dry creek bed. We crossed into the pasture. There was a tree line to the south, another to the east. Gnarled, scruffy, the words longed to get at the essence beneath what they said. They wanted to react to a moment of wanting to hold together in all the undoing that living is, to call to a purpose beyond. The horse eats grass in his pasture all day, and of an evening gets sweet feed in his bowl. Usually a leaf has fallen into it from the tree under which he waits. I tell him he can eat leaves. By faith he will be full. He waits until I bring him sweet feed in the bucket. He has a line of trees along the dry creek bed to stand under, an open shed for shelter, a turning of pages, the foliage of writing surrounding him. I've lived for the past few years between Kansas and Texas, where I have grandchildren that I have helped with. And so I lived in Kansas, and I would drive down to Texas, and I lived in a barn or a butler building on my son's property in the country, which we renovated and made a mother-in-law barn or a grandma's shed, whatever you want to call it. And my son has a horse, Pete, and Pete has a large pasture, and he eats grass all day. But David gives him sweet feed of an evening, and about 3:00 in the afternoon, Pete thinks it's evening, and I could hear him out there grumbling. Horse. I walk in the wet leaves to feed the horse. The drip of rain on the metal roof is a finger tapping a drum. Over the fence, a torn horse blanket thrown. The clouds not heavy enough for rain to fall steady, but leak like an old bucket into which sweet feed is ladled. Some of the seed dripping through a small crack in the bucket as I walk to the horse. Beyond the pasture, a road cuts through the field. Beyond the field, a far stretch of land, as if a sea on which disciples wait. Because he walked on the sea, he thought we could follow. Lord, I come to the water where you say walk. Just step onto the nothingness as though it were solid. My thoughts still stop at you. The trees are oars standing on their end, the branches barren of their leaves. A near dark, cloudy winter evening. Somewhere under the dock, waves hit against the barrels. You're going to hear a couple of poems about Pete. In coldest weather. The horse tank is frozen. The horse wears his horse coat he does not like. He wants to drink water. The horse waits at his horse tank. The water is frozen. There have been squirrels in his horse tank. They have drowned in hot weather. They only wanted a drink of water. A man walks to the horse tank. He carries a sledgehammer the horse shall not want. The man hits the lid of the ice on the horse tank. He hits and hits again. The horse is not afraid. A rusted shovel leans against the pasture fence. It has lifted drowned squirrels from the horse tank. Now it lifts ice chunks, so the horse can drink water in his horse tank, so a horse can drink the coldest weather. Maybe one more. Again, about observation and arrangement of those observations. I would take notes and then sort of separate them and draw them back together. This one is also called The Horse. The horse has a 3-acre pasture, but there is a path of matted grass to his shed, to his sweet feed bowl in a corner of the pasture. A woman in a headscarf walks a 2-rut road through a far pasture. A man with a stick walks on the paved road. The hoofprints of the horses brand the dried mud. The horse watches the child leave on the school bus and return in the afternoon while he waits for his sweet feed, his ears shaped like small teepees. They turn to the airwaves in the wind that travels the world. The horse picks up on the suffering. He hears the call of geese, birds, field dogs, at night the coyotes, all the refugees, while in the day a gray squirrel runs along the fence line by his bowl. Maybe just one more about Pete. He's all through this book. As you can tell, he was a great annoyance. Mid-July, Texas. In the corner of the pasture, in the shade of the tree, the horse waits by his bowl. It was 105 in the afternoon. By evening, it still must be 100. The horse has rolled in the dust, his coat spotted with dirt from the field, where he walks all day eating dry stubbles of grass. The cicadas drone their noise to summer, scraping legs together as if to get rid of the heat. The birds flock to their water bowl I set by the house. In the storage shed, I ladle sweet feed into a bucket I carry to the horse. He waits in the corner of the pasture, grumbling. He is tired of the flies that surround him. He is tired of the heat. I tell him I will pray to the God of temperature, who is busy overseeing matters of pestilence, upheaval, civil war, and unrest. He may have neglected coolant. He may say he is not responsible. Whatever I ask, I know his answers remain his own. I lived in Minnesota for 20 years, and after I retired from Macalester College, I went south to Kansas and Texas with grandchildren. And sometimes I come back north. I do miss it sometimes, and it was wonderful last night driving from the airport to see those trees reaching up to the sunset. Oh, wait a minute. I wanted to say something about this. Oh, I lived in Ramsey County in St. Paul, and I knew a little bit about the Native history during which Ramsey had been governor, mid-19th century. And this piece is called cursive, which is a type of handwriting that they do not even teach in schools anymore. My grandchildren tell me I can't read your handwriting. That's where that line came from, because they were not taught cursive. This is another one that I wanted to write just a flat essay on my trip to Adney Lake, and of course poetry began taking over. Poetry, the Pokemon, started eating away, making fragments of sentences. Cursive, a long trip north. The practice of handwriting, a formation of islands, territories to be traversed, a silent wish. Cursive from the medieval Latin cursivus, to run, to course. It is the story of the earth, movement, momentum, the plates beneath the crust, paragraphs in opposition. The wind patterns, currents, animal migrations, early people walking places they could not see, but following a journey they felt within. Later people often walking from expulsion or the need to leave a place they could no longer live. Even foliage, its forcible removal from trees in autumn, even roots crawl underground. Adney Lake, northern Minnesota, Sandy Lake, all those lakes, staying in a cabin on Adney, driving to others. The flat lakes with few waves in their mouth, unbothered by boats, late fall, watching the handwriting of water among reeds on the edge of the lake, to course, to circle back and forth, to make motion, a blade against a cold surface. Cursive began with expulsion, the parting from letters standing separate from one another in a manuscript, now written to be connected with loops and curtsies, to be carried, to be preserved, as a resonant history of removal. The Indian tribes knew war. The Chippewa and Dakota fought one another before arrival of the Europeans. They pushed out one another. They wanted hunting grounds. They wanted place where they felt oneness move through the trees. The Europeans landed there, not to be removed, as a word from its sound in cursive, onto islands overwashed with waves. Handwriting moves like an oar, to course, to discourse, to disperse, to mark with fragments of vines, twigs, cattails, the entanglements of water, placing oral stories into the silence of written words, another expulsion they brought. At night by the campfire, the old stories shiver, a brush woof in the distance, the call of an owl, a voice from across the lake, water carries sound across its surface. 1850, the governor of Minnesota decided to disperse annuities for ceded land at Sandy Lake, 258 miles west of Madeline Island. The Chippewa traveled rivers, creeks, and portages, wading through October, November, December. Duped, set up. The government officials left the natives abandoned, hoping they would die from hunger and exposure. The annuities only partly came later on Sandy Lake. The Chippewa returned to Madeline Island across frozen creeks and rivers. They carried the bodies of children back with them. These words I write on the page, the sound of a pencil on paper, the supplanting of one on another, ripples across the shore that is my page. That makes me think I'm finished, but I'm not. After I moved to Texas, because I love to drive, I got in my car and I drove around the state along Highway 90, not Interstate 90 that crosses Minnesota and the upper part of the world, but down along this barren country where nothing is, which I also write about in Psalm To Whom. So this was a poem that I wrote from being down there. Wait a minute. Oh, it was a poem I liked, and now I can't find it. I may come back to it. In the meantime, I have an assignment for you. If you're in this writing festival that's coming up, there are 5 words, I have lived between places. So some of those of you who are going to do writing exercises this week, write that down and work on a poem of identity or origin. It's called Severance. I have lived between places, having nowhere but a journey on the land, displaced into displacements. A verb becomes an object. Motion is destination. I am not the same in different places. The world is floating loose. There is barren ground, tossing wind. At night, the quarter moon flat as a white wall tire. I've actually read to people before who did not know what a white wall tire was, which I think was over by 1960. I can't remember exactly, so I understand. This is the poem I was looking for. From Southwest Texas, Seminole Canyon, and a lot of places there's Indian petroglyphs and a lot of history on those little plaques beside the road. We were talking about that, Beverly, how sometimes they're not correct. 2 spirals on the canyon wall. Often it was about the sea, the merfolk and other mishaps and other mashups that swim for those on ships to look down in the water upon. The aberrations that don't belong, of different parts stitched together. Columbus saw them on his voyage, Shakespeare in his imagination, Pliny the Elder, who knows where he was. Sand crabs surely would eat them, maybe octopi. The mermaids fled the Spanish conquistadors. They left stories of geyser waves that washed on shore and left them stranded. The battering winds blowing birds from cottonwoods and mesquite. The mermaids and their side mates, little pieces of scales, flicked off for wave lines on the water of the Gulf. I wanted to say something also about the amazement of poetry. When you're writing your poems this week, you should experiment with form. I subscribe to a poem a day, so every morning I get up and turn on my computer and there is a poem waiting for me. And sometimes I am astounded at how unpoetic poems can be. I mean, they can be lovely, lyrical, flowery, and they can also be like this. It's called Diagnostic Quiz for Human Ghost, and it's a series of questions. Over the past 2 weeks, please list the items you have lost. At the present moment, do you know the location and number of your teeth? Please estimate the weight of each of the following: left lung, half liver, 3 fingers on your right hand. Over the past 2 weeks, please estimate the number of times you've attempted to start a conversation and failed. How important do you feel to others? Are you sitting atop the creaking hinges of something only you can see? Are you certain there is no part of your body that is missing? And I have not read all of them for you. I kind of appreciate that in a way. I don't know if I could do it, but to make it so bland and cardboard-like that it is a questionnaire. And then the other coast of poetry is pretty wonderful. Wallace Stevens has always been a favorite poet of mine. He also said, "A poem is a cry of its own occasion." What exactly does that mean? A poem is a cry that tries to bring its subjects into reality, into an occasion, into something that you can respond to, I guess. Who knows from time to time what Wallace Stevens is talking about, but it's always beautiful, and I'm going to read Dominion of Black. At night by the fire, the colors of the bushes and of the fallen leaves repeating themselves turned in the room, like the leaves themselves turning in the wind. Yes, but the color of the heavy hemlocks came striding, and I remember the cry of the peacocks. The color of their tails were like the leaves themselves turning in the wind. In the twilight wind, they swept over the room, just as they flew from the boughs of the hemlocks down to the ground. I heard them cry, the peacocks. Was it a cry against the twilight or against the leaves themselves, turning in the wind, turning as the flames turned in the fire? Now, I also could not explain that to you. Yes, he deserves a big... I could not explain that to you, but there's some times when language just washes over you, that you're caught up in the rhythm or the assonance or something that is just there, and to me, that is real poetry, although all kinds of poetry have a reason to be. All right, that's basically what I wanted to say. So let me see that I covered everything. I do have one more poem about Pete that I may finish with. Titled North Central Texas. By the tall field grasses, unmoving at the moment, a gray barn with a wide open door. A dirt road curves beside the field. A light pole leans to the south with a single wire to the outbuilding, as though pulled toward the black hole of the open door. A blue sky with a few dangling clouds drift also toward the low, flat-roofed barn. I never have walked there to see what is inside. I stay away from the uncertainty, perhaps, despite the slow scorn of wind against faith, the punting against it. It seems to me logic to call upon the unknown one, to call home. Thank you. I sold my house in Kansas, and I now live in Gainesville, Texas, with my own house. But I really miss that time on the barn, and in the fields. I would just sit there of a morning, and I would just look out, and there was a woman walking up that 2-rut road, and I would write her down, and then I would hear Pete, and then this would happen, and then little seed would drip out of the bucket, the hole in the bucket, as I took food to him, and there was just such beauty in the plainness of that land and in the harshness and in that heat. I don't like Texas at all. But even poetry can find a place, in italics, place of home. So thank you. Are there any comments or... You're very kind. Two fields, one to the east of the house, one to the south. Again, there was that field out that one window and the field out the other. All you have to do if you want to write is just copy down the world around you. You begin with a few words. Then other words want to join them. Words off to the side you didn't realize were there until you started. Then other words that connect to those other words are there, back and forth and back to the beginning. Many come to ride along. Some are carriers of burdens. Those are the words you tell first. Then words that have nothing to do with the story begin to crowd in. At first the story seems too small. It cannot contain everything that wants to speak, but you let all the words in. The word you speak grows large enough to contain them, until the world grows so large it collapses and is gone. The people, the animals, even the stars disappear. They leave the dug graves of their black holes. And then I insert a little epigraph. You may not know how much terror we bear. Vespers, Louise Gluck. I really enjoy writing any more of these hybrid genres that come in. We were talking about that earlier, where you can mix whatever you do, and poetry and prose. I have a little short piece of fiction in here too that I chopped up again with poetry, eating at it. And then I have a little excerpt from the Bible. Jesus asked who his mother was, Mark 3:33. I also can ask who was mine, a person outside herself, and therefore I was outside also. A woman who could not connect with a child, who was in a place she was not comfortable, not wanting to be there, where I happened to be also. But it was not her choice, nor mine either. She did what she was supposed to do, have a child, do her chores, and finding she was a remote road by herself, and didn't know who herself was. I hate to be cruel, and I don't think this is really cruel. I hope it's honesty and truth that you have to reach in your words. She was raised on a farm, a closed-off place. The old farm road originally did not go beyond the creek. We made long trips to her parents' farm, from which she came, to the farmhouse at the end of a long, dead-end dirt road. She lived in a realm where what others thought dictated our behavior, what we did, who we were, upright in the eyes of the community of the Methodist Church and the neighbors and those my father worked with. And by the way, I take sentences and I chop them up 3 words a period, and then another 2 or 3 words, little fragments and sub-sentences. I don't know. I think you should follow your instinct even when you ask yourself, what on earth are you doing? This doesn't make sense. You would be in trouble in school. Your teacher would come up and correct you. But I just followed that instinct. There was a fire that never burned in her, except in far reaches where wild animals roamed, and the fear of them kept her in the house, away from the wilderness she knew was there. I think that's enough of that one. although it does go on for quite a while. But no. I do think that's enough for tonight. Thank you, Marty.
So, if you want to have a close encounter with Diane, she's going to be signing books back there as well. And please go and buy one of these books. Buy two, give one to a friend. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. Before I let you all go, I just have to thank some groups that have made this pet festival possible. One is the Friends of Peter White Public Library. They pay for the live streaming equipment, but they also gave us lots of funds for this festival. The Library of Michigan is a sponsor. Northern Michigan University is a sponsor. And there's a couple venues, too. Superior Culture is hosting something. Provisions Marquette hosted something yesterday. And we have Rippling River Resort, that's also hosting something. All of these, it takes a village to put on a poetry festival. And that's what we have for this. So I really want to thank all of the wonderful sponsors and organizations and businesses that have helped us put this together. So anyway, thank you all for coming. Please go buy a book, talk to Diane, and get her to sign your book, and help yourself to the free books back there if you want. And tomorrow night, Uper Poetry Anthology. Please come back, 7 p.m. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful night. Thank you so much.